Joseph, a simple carpenter from Nazareth, played an extraordinary role in the life of Jesus, being, at the same time, a model of faith and a figure of unconditional support for the divine mission of his adopted son. His life was not marked by grandiose deeds or public speeches, but by actions of silent faith, obedience to God, and an integrity that did not waver, even in the face of extraordinary challenges. He lived according to the principles of justice and righteousness, something that stood out in the society of his time. Joseph was a man who believed in the power of God to guide the steps of his life and, therefore, always sought to follow divine plans with deep reverence. His decision to welcome Mary, the mother of Jesus, and to accept the divine call is a testimony to his faith and courage in the face of circumstances that many would consider unforeseen or challenging. As a man of faith, Joseph knew that his life was in God's hands, and he acted in accordance with this certainty. He was the example of a believer who, even without understanding all the details of divine plans, obeyed, trusting in God's wisdom and love. His life, therefore, was built on trust in God, and this made him a central figure in preparing Jesus for his mission. Jose, in addition to being a carpenter of recognized skill, had spiritual gifts that made him an even more unique figure. He was not just an ordinary worker, but someone gifted with a spiritual sensitivity that enabled him to heal others. This implies that, in addition to his manual skill, Joseph also had an intimate relationship with the divine, capable of bringing relief and healing to the physical and spiritual needs of others. The practice of healing others is not explicitly recorded in Scripture, but Christian tradition often associates certain spiritual gifts with Joseph's righteous character. He did not use his gifts selfishly, but for the good of his community, always seeking to manifest God's goodness and mercy towards those around him. This ability to heal reflects an altruistic spirit, which was dedicated to the physical and emotional healing of others, as well as a deep care for family and community. Joseph, as Jesus' adoptive father, had a profound impact on Jesus' development, not only as a man, but also as the future Messiah. Jesus grew up learning the lessons of hard work, honesty, and integrity that Joseph taught him. The family environment that Joseph and Mary provided was fundamental for Jesus to grow in a balanced and healthy way, both physically and spiritually. Although Jesus was divine, he also lived in a human reality, and he needed figures like Joseph to guide him in the early years of his life. Joseph was not only responsible for physically supporting the family, but also for transmitting moral and spiritual values to Jesus. Living with Joseph profoundly shaped Jesus' life, providing him with the principles that would guide his actions throughout his public ministry. Jose's practical wisdom was not limited to carpentry, but extended to all aspects of everyday life. Through his example of life, Joseph taught Jesus to live simply, to value manual work, and to be humble. These lessons were essential to Jesus' mission because they reflected the principles he would later teach others. Joseph was fully aware that Jesus had a unique divine mission that was beyond human understanding. He understood that his role was not to influence or try to control Jesus' destiny, but rather to support and protect the child who was destined to transform the world. Joseph knew that Jesus was no ordinary child, and that his mission would be great and, possibly, painful. Throughout Jesus' life, Joseph must have felt a mixture of pride, protection, and, at the same time, a silent fear about his son's fate. He knew that Jesus' mission was beyond any human expectation, and that Jesus must grow, develop, and fulfill his role in time and according to God's plans. Joseph also had the wisdom to understand that the time of Jesus' revelation had not yet arrived. Therefore, he remained attentive and patient, respecting God's plans for Jesus, without rushing to see his mission fulfilled. This patience was a rare virtue, especially at a time when impatience and a rush for results were common. But Joseph knew that God had control over everything, and he trusted completely in divine timing. As Jesus grew older, Joseph began to understand that his adopted son had a painful fate. He knew that Jesus' mission would not be easy, and that it would involve suffering. Although a father's pain at seeing his son suffer was a constant concern for Joseph, he also recognized that suffering was part of the divine plan. He was a man of faith who, even in the face of his pain, submitted himself to God's will. Jesus' suffering was not something that Joseph desired, but something that he accepted as necessary to fulfill the mission of saving humanity. This suffering would be central in Jesus' life, culminating in his crucifixion, and Joseph, even though he was the adoptive father, knew that he had to accept and trust in the divine purpose. He thus became a figure who understood the complexity of suffering and the need for trust in God, even in the most difficult moments. Joseph was not only the family's provider, but also Jesus' spiritual mentor. He taught with his actions, as someone who lived his faith in a practical way. Joseph was always attentive to the physical needs of his family, but he also knew how to be a model of faith for Jesus. He was someone who understood life's difficulties and faced them with faith, patience, and courage. The lessons that Joseph passed on to Jesus, whether in his daily work or in family conversations, were fundamental to the character of Jesus, who would later apply these principles in his public ministry. Joseph's love for Jesus was also not limited to his role as a foster father. He truly cared about Jesus' spiritual well-being and sought to teach him in everything he did. Even in everyday situations, Joseph provided the spiritual guidance Jesus needed to grow in wisdom and grace. He was a pillar of love, support, and example, shaping the man Jesus would become. Although Joseph departed from history before Jesus began his public mission, his impact was profound and lasting. The education and values transmitted by Joseph prepared Jesus to face the challenges that would come. The integrity, faith, and humility that Joseph taught young Jesus directly influenced his teachings and actions, which would later transform the history of humanity. Joseph did not seek recognition or glory, but his role in the formation of Jesus was extremely important. He was a figure of quiet faith, someone who understood his place in the divine plan and acted with wisdom, patience, and love to help fulfill that plan. Joseph's legacy is seen not only in his personal life, but also in the impact he had on Jesus' spiritual development. Joseph was a profound example of faith, humility, and obedience. He lived his life according to God's designs, without questioning or trying to alter divine plans, even when those plans included immense challenges. His dedication and unconditional support for Jesus were fundamental to the fulfillment of the divine mission, and his legacy continues to this day as an example of how to live in harmony with God's will. Joseph, with his humility and wisdom, did not seek prominence, but his impact on Jesus' life and the fulfillment of the plan of salvation was invaluable. Your role in the story of Jesus is an inspiration to all who seek to live with faith, obedience, and integrity. He was a true servant of God, willing to do whatever was necessary for the divine plan to be fulfilled. If you were inspired by the story of Jose, a man of faith and integrity, and want to see more content like this, subscribe to our channel. Don't forget to leave a like and share with your friends. Your interaction helps us continue creating amazing stories for you. Thank you for being part of our journey.